Hi, I'm Brian Kennedy, PhD. I'm Canadian, but I work at Pasadena City College. I am a professor of English. I'd like to share with you an essay that I wrote, and I'll largely read it. It's called Magic Mixed with Terror, Rendering Goaltending Uncanny Once Again. This essay is arranged into 4 sections. First, the journey towards the uncanny. Second, bring on the automatons, or what is a save? Third, the 3 causes. And finally, can there be drama without danger? Let's start with a poem by Randy Maggs called The Last Face-Off. This comes from his amazing book, Nightwork, the Sawchuck Poems, and I'll be using several other of those poems in the paper today. Goalies, they mouth to one another cheerfully. Everyone knows they have their dark and bloody ways of dealing with the world. Goaltending has always been about stopping the puck, obviously. But in the not-too-distant past, playing goal was an alchemic mix of myth, mystery, and madness. This because occupying the position, especially in the one-goalie pre-mask days, demanded near-insane acts of courage and confidence from netminders. Looking back on it now, it's easy to see why netminders verged on madness sometimes, and fun to reminisce about the time when the goalie was the dark-souled outsider, the alien other who nonetheless had to be seen as occupying a crucial seat on the train, because if he didn't do what he did, then nobody else would get to do their thing. As Maggs says in his poetry collection, and in the poem particularly No Country for Old Men, they knew they weren't going anywhere without him. That's Terry Sawchuck's point of view on the teammates that he had. But those days are gone, and now we've entered the age of mechanization, almost digitization of the position. This is largely the product of shrapnel-proof gear that allows for styles of play inconceivable, even as late as 30 years ago, but which has in the process stolen the soul from the craft of keeping the net. Section 1. The Journey Towards the Uncanny. Keeping goal was a treacherous affair in the days pre-mask, and so goalies themselves were seen as peculiar and acted that way. Manifestations of mania included Jacques Plante knitting before games, Glenn Hall throwing up before he played, and Terry Sawchuck keeping in a jar pieces of bone chips removed from his elbow through surgery. These were the goalies of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, arguably the most dangerous 3 decades to be a goaltender because the value of the protective equipment had not kept up with the human invention of the slap shot or the mechanical novelty of the curved stick, and certainly not with the superhuman strength of Bobby Hull, that shot's most dangerous proponent. Pre-mask, goaltending was about myth because it had to be. The myth covered over the violence of the game and the necessary terror that went with being the one goalie on the squad, the one who had to play and to keep playing no matter the injury. When there was one goaltender dressed per team per game, no matter what happened, the goalie got fixed up and ended the game. Emile the Cat Francis described the situation to me for living the hockey dream, saying that they took him back to the room one night after a shot broke his nose and took out 5 front teeth. They gave him a stiff shot of brandy to get him relaxed enough to make repairs. He was not a drinker and was basically inebriated when he got back to the cage some minutes later. He told me that had he gotten hit in the head again, he wouldn't have noticed. He also cites 200 as his lifetime stitches count. However, it wasn't just injury goalies feared, but displacement. Glenn Hall played from 1952-53 until 1970-71. A total of 906 regular season games. From 55-56 until 61-62, he played all 70 of his team's games each year, 7 complete consecutive seasons. He knew that giving way in the net was a risk. If the other guy came in and was better, he went back to the AHL, possibly never to resurface in the NHL. What other profession in the world has only 6 proponents holding the best jobs at any given moment? The pressure of the job drove Jerry McNeil, who tended goal for the Canadians from the late 40s to the mid-50s, further into alcoholism, as his son, academic David McNeil, PhD, details in his book, In the Pressure of the Moment, Remembering Jerry McNeil. David McNeil shows that the mental anguish carried by the position was not a private matter, as when his father was mentioned in the newspaper this way, quote, No one knew what the future held for Jerry after his nervous crack-up in the Chicago series. David says later in his book, "My father always maintained that what he wanted was to begin a normal life, to get up in the morning and go to a job that didn't have such life or death pressure about it." He broadens the point to include other netminders, and I'll quote him, "Many of the goalies who began their careers in the 40s or early 50s, when the substitute did not dress, had problems with nerves. Durnan, Sawchuk, and Hall, to name a few. There is no question that the position of goaltender carries with it the pressure of knowing that the slightest misjudgment could be disastrous for one's team." Red Berenson, who played in the league for nearly the entirety of the 60s and 70s, shed some light on the position even after there were two goalies on NHL rosters. Quote, "You could always tell who was going to start the next game. We'd have a light pregame skate or a pregame meeting the morning of game day, and the guy sitting out was loosey-goosey. The other guy's face was white as a sheet." Of course, it's the pressure of the moment, a la McNeil, but more. Back then, it was the danger. Perhaps nobody expresses this better than Maggs, whose whole volume is a dreadful and beautiful agglomeration of artistic takes on Sawchuk. But one poem about getting stitched up in the dressing room stands out. This is from stanza 3 of Let's Go Dancing. "The clinic and its dread utensils, the clatter in pans, blood by the door, not mine. The doctor hums to himself while he thumbs back my lip and mutters, 'It's getting to be a nasty neighborhood.' Hums the same tune as last time, stitching my lip. I count 5 on the inside, 7 out is 12. Forget the freezing, I tell him, thinking of Lumley the night when they tossed me over his sweater. First snow and fall, he's gone with the birds. Jesus, no, forget the freezing. 20 minutes tops, I skate back into the roar and hammering feet of the crowd. They love me tonight, the shits." Less a literary take than a factual one on the Sawchuk face comes from the coroner's report upon his untimely death in 1970. Maggs quotes it as the frontispiece of his book, and David McNeil offers a personal recollection of the scarred visage of Sawchuk. Quote, "I still remember, as a boy, shaking hands with a smiling Terry Sawchuk, seeing the scars on his face, and thinking that this guy looked like Frankenstein." He notes that various biographers and poet Maggs show that the scars could be said to be a visible representation of the trauma he endured. With all of this mangling of flesh going on, imagine what the out players thought of goalies. Even coming into the room, the goalie would have been looked at with a combination of pity, shame, and revulsion. And it must have been hard to suppress the thoughts, what's wrong with that guy that he wants to do this? Combined with, I'm sure glad someone's willing to do this for us. This changed with the invention of the goalie mask. Pre-mask, the goalie's face, with the resulting horror and fear of playing the position, was revealed, no matter that it wasn't desirable to look at. Post-mask, the face covering suggested its own truth because it concealed the face while also protecting it. Speaking of medieval carnival, literary theorist Mikhail Bakhtin says that masks are connected with the joy of change and reincarnation, but they also hide and they deceive. In using the mask, goalies covered their faces, rendering them uncanny in the way Freud described the phenomenon in his 1919 essay. Using Freud's terms, the mask can invoke an occurrence of presence which is at once oddly familiar, heimlich, and frighteningly unfamiliar, unheimlich, forgive the pronunciation. The latter sensation intensified because of what was concealed and kept out of sight. The irony, then, is that in becoming safer, the goalie became uncanny, rendered such by the loss of the real source of his inscrutability. Imagine being Jacques Plante's teammate the night he finally wore a mask and seeing what prompted it, getting the nose nearly ripped off his face, then being pushed out the dressing room door to finish the game. The familiar grotesque face was now hidden by the unfamiliar grotesque mask. Freud could have been talking about the moment in 1959 when Plante put on the mask when he says, "Something uncanny in real experience can be traced back without exception to something familiar that has been repressed." From that moment on, masks quickly evolved, and goaltending had to have been much less terrifying for the person inside the mask and for those, both players and spectators, who watched. However, with Freud in mind, I'd like to argue that goaltending is just as defamiliarized an activity as it ever was, albeit not because of the covering of the grotesque visage. Today, goaltender uncanniness experienced by the observer is located not in the masked face, but the armored body. Section 2. Bring on the automatons, or what is a save? Today's netminders would never think of leaping off the ice and cradling the puck in their bellies, then falling into a fetal position on the ice, as I saw Jerry Cheevers do when I attended a Montreal Canadiens game on April 1st, 1973. Too showy? Not in the training manual, more like. Goaltending, as it is played and coached nowadays, exists in the form of scripted reactions to any and every shot. What is a save has radically changed definitions. What I mean is this. A save used to be roughly defined as a maneuver invented in real time and designed to place a portion of the goalie's protected or unprotected body in front of the puck so as to keep it from entering the net. The definition now would be something like this. A maneuver practiced and polished, which responds to a given situation in a prescribed way, and which is designed to use the equipment to interfere with the travel of the puck into the net. This reflects a technicalized, almost digitized approach to stopping the puck. The question nowadays is not what's his style, and I say his because I'm mostly talking about NHL goaltenders here. What's his style? It's can he play the style? Sometimes this new way looks absurdly simple. Let me cite Ray Emery as an example. The late Ray Emery. As his stock diminished and his career appeared to be over, he came to Anaheim as a backup during the 2010-11 season. In all the games I saw him play, and I write about the NHL, and I've been to around 650 NHL games in several different cities and arenas. Anyway, in all the games I saw him play, I swear I never saw a save that was inventive or even interesting. His entire strategy seemed to be to crawl back and forth in the crease on his knees, letting pucks hit him as he moved, or didn't. It was boring to watch. It induced me to think anyone could do this. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this. It worked. He played more than 100 further games after leaving the Ducks for Chicago, then Philadelphia, from 2011 to 2015. And I recognize that not just anyone can do this, or more of us would be, but Emery is an example of the contemporary phenomenon which creates a formula of what used to be an art. This makes the position much less dramatic to watch. In the past, there was no script. Glenn Hall invented the butterfly. Johnny Bauer leaned way down to find the puck with his eyes. Sawchuk butterflied as well, as did Tony Esposito. But they were more than balanced off with stand-up goalies like Ken Dryden, or more recently, and perhaps the last, Kirk McLean, who would appear to be playing an entirely different position than the guy at the other end of the net when he was paired against a flopper. Goaltending nowadays is a science, as most netminders practice it. Example, the puck comes across behind the net and you use a reverse VH. There's such a thing as save selection, which is the shorthand goalie coaches use for, are you fitting your moves to the formula? That's why it's refreshing to see someone like Anton Khudobin, who most recently took on Andrei Vasilevsky for the Stanley Cup. Craig Simpson describes the contest, which could also be read as Khudobin versus any other goaltender in the NHL nowadays, this way on Hockey Central on Sportsnet 590 on September 25th, 2020. One thing that stands out to me is Vasilevsky's control and his precision and his technique. When you're looking at him visually, when that pass is coming across, and I'm trying to find and track his movements and to look for the holes around him, you don't see nearly as much. By contrast, Khudobin is so aggressive. He's a battler. Part of being a battler is it's harder to predict the read of where you're going to be, even for my own defenseman. Sometimes he's coming flying across, and if the shot doesn't come, Khudobin is long gone. So that's what you give up when you're not a technique goaltender like Vasilevsky is. the battle you've got to love, and he never quits on anything. But I always felt that good players are going to find a way to put it past you when you're that type of goaltender. When you read that back in the context I'm putting it in, it essentially says this: it's fun to see a guy fling himself all over the ice, but in the end, technique wins. Players on the goalie's own team even don't want to adjust to a different style. They just want to play like they're coached. That's much easier to do when it doesn't matter which body is behind the mask, because the formula is being followed by rote. To fit my argument, I might add this: what is not defamiliar cannot be uncanny. And this is a point that I'll return to nearer the end of this paper. Section 3, the 3 causes. Modern goaltending practice and its sameness largely comes down to 3 things. 1, you don't have to be crazy to play in net anymore, as you did in Sawchuk's era, nor will it drive you mad. Witness another of Randall Magg's poems, this one showing the psychological and social effects of netminding. Quote, you couldn't just go home, your head still rattling over the one you made at the end or didn't. Some nights it hurt just to breathe. Goaltenders occasionally, as we know, get a tooth knocked out, but facial reconstruction has not been needed on any goaltender in the past few decades. And apart from Robin Leonard talking about his mental health challenges, goalies don't discuss the matter of their mindset. They just stop the puck or don't, and they're there the next season, or they're not. Number 2, the romance of doing the job has been erased by the statistics that measure how effectively one did the job, as if every save was made already in the past tense. Grant Fuhr and Kelly Rudy, each of whom participated in epic battles of the 80s, were not primarily concerned about numbers. What did it matter if they let in 6 goals when their team got them 7 or 8? That was the attitude. Now it's all about the numbers. A .909 save percentage? He'll never do. A .948? There's no way he can sustain that. It's not about style or how fun the player is to watch or those memorable saves that goalies do sometimes pile up. It's how effective can he be? And the answer lies in numbers, save percentage and goals against average. They don't even talk about wins as much as they used to. Number 3, reason 3. The job of the goalie is done more by managing the equipment than using the body to make the save. This becomes apparent when you see the modern NHL goalie going down the ramp to the ice, waddling along, managing the pads so he doesn't hit the walls. The size of him when you stand next to him is like he's 2 people. The trapper is the size of a peach basket, way out in front of where the webbing of a baseball glove would be. It's the gear, not the person inside it, which does the work. Or perhaps more correctly, if tautologically, it's the person's management of the gear which makes it possible for the gear to stop the puck entering the net. Final section, number 4, drama without the danger. So what is there to do about this? Probably goalie coaches aren't going away. Some people advocate growing the net. I say leave it as it is and shrink the goalie. When he or she is not wearing a size 52 sweater, the netminder will learn to make saves the old-fashioned way, by inventing every one in the absence of what came before it or what might come after. By making the human make the save rather than the gear or the coaching, we render the goalie interesting again. Why? Because the watcher will know just enough about the netminder, Heimlich, but be just unfamiliar enough with what she or he will do next, unheimlich, to restore the sense of the uncanny that makes watching sports fun. We need to get behind the mask and imagine that Randall Maggs was writing about the contemporary goalie when he said this about Sawchuk, quote, "Then bang the door and here we go. Someone shouts these words I love and dread. I hear them all my life. Let the goalie go first." Thank you very much for your kind attention. If you'd like to be in touch, you can get a hold of me at bpkennedy@pasadena.edu or follow me on Twitter @growinguphockey. Thank you.